What would you sacrifice if destiny cornered you? Would you give your last coin for a man in chains? Would you defy the jeering crowd, the sneers of nobles, the crack of the auctioneer's whip, just to claim a stranger no sane woman dared to touch? And what if that stranger wasn't just a man, but a beast? What if the warrior you saved was the alphaking, broken, betrayed, and seething with power too dark to cage? What if the moment your eyes met his, he claimed you, not with words, not with choice, but with fate, blood, and desire that burns hotter than fire itself? This is not a gentle tale. It is dark. It is twisted. It is filled with lust, danger, and a bond that defies reason. And once you enter, you may never leave unchanged. If you love alpha kings bound by chains, heroines who gamble everything, and forbidden fated bonds that smolder under the blood moon, then lean closer, because Liora's story begins now. But before we dive into this world of passion and peril, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way you'll always be the first to know when my next heartwarming audiobook stories are released. This journey is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to be left behind. The stench hit first. Rotting straw, sweat, blood, the metallic tang of fear. Liora pulled her threadbare cloak tighter around her shoulders as she pressed into the shadows of the lowland auction yard. The crowd was thick, merchants dripping in silks, nobles in furs, their jeweled hands clutching tankards of spiced ale. They shouted, laughed, gambled recklessly as if this place were nothing more than a theater. But to Liora, it was a pit, a den of cruelty where broken men were paraded like cattle. And then she saw him. At first, she thought the cage at the far end held a beast. Chains thicker than a man's arm coiled around limbs, iron spikes hammered through shackles. His back was broad, bare, marred by lash marks that had healed into raised ridges of scar tissue. His head hung low, a mane of dark hair hiding his face. But even broken, he radiated power. The kind of power that made nobles uneasy, that made drunkards laugh too loudly to hide their nerves. And the auctioneer's voice boomed, oily and smug. Lot 27, a Highland wolf, untamed, unbroken, savage. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Liora froze. A wolf? He lifted his head, and her breath caught. His eyes were not human, golden, burning, molten fire staring out from the shadows of his bruised face. For one heartbeat they locked on hers, like he had been waiting. Liora's heart hammered against her ribs. She should look away, she should run, but she couldn't. Something primal, something ancient curled in her blood. The auctioneer slammed his staff on the platform. "Who bids for the alphaking?" The crowd roared. Nobles shouted over one another, tossing coins that clattered against the wooden stage. 5 silver, 10, 15. The numbers climbed. Liora's hands trembled. Her purse felt impossibly light, her last coins barely enough for bread, but still she could not tear her gaze away. The alphaking, that's what they called him. A name out of war songs, out of nightmares. A conqueror who had once made the lowlands tremble, and now, caged, humiliated, sold like chattel. Her lips parted, whispering before she could stop herself, "I can't." Ewan tugged her sleeve. His small voice barely rose over the shouting crowd. "Liora, we should go, please." But Darius, the name thundered in her mind, though she had never heard it, lifted his head higher. The torchlight caught his jaw, the curve of his mouth, the raw defiance etched in every line of him. His golden eyes never left hers. The auctioneer sneered. 30 silver. Going once?" Leora's voice rang out, startling even herself. 100! Silence. The crowd turned as one, disbelieving laughter rising like smoke. 100 silver? The auctioneer repeated, eyes narrowing. From a peasant girl? Leora's cheeks burned. Her purse contained no such fortune, but in her palm she felt the cool weight of her last silver coin. Only one, the last her family possessed, and yet her voice did not falter. "Yes!" The nobles jeered. "She's mad! Does she know what he'll do to her? The beast will tear her apart!" The auctioneer leaned forward, lips curling. 1 coin? You mock this house of trade!" But before he could strike her down with words, the alphaking moved. A low growl rumbled through the cage, deep and primal, vibrating through the planks of the stage itself. His chains rattled as he straightened to his full height. The crowd fell silent. He spoke, voice hoarse but resonant. "She is mine." The words were simple, but they cracked like thunder. The auctioneer paled, the nobles whispered in fear, and Liora, her knees threatened to give way, heat flooding her veins. Those words were not a request, not even a claim. They were truth, absolute. The hammer fell. "Sold! To the girl with the last coin." The crowd erupted, half in fury, half in drunken glee at the spectacle. But Liora barely heard them. Her ears rang, her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. The alphaking's gaze pinned her, burning her alive where she stood. In that moment, in that silence between heartbeats, she knew her life was no longer her own. And as the guards unshackled him, releasing the beast into her keeping, one thought seared into her mind with terrifying clarity. She hadn't saved him. He had chosen her.
The weight of her choice nearly crushed her the moment the hammer fell. He was heavier than she imagined, more beast than man, his body carved from muscle and scar, slumped against her like a fallen tree when the guards released him from his chains. 2 men struggled just to drag him off the platform, his boots scraping wood, his head lolling to one side. Liora swallowed hard, clutching her threadbare cloak as the jeers rained down from the crowd. "Look at her, the fool girl! She'll be his first meal. Better dig your own grave, witchling." Their laughter followed her out of the auction yard, but she dared not look back. All her focus was on the monstrous body she had just bought with her last coin. Darius. She did not know how she knew his name, only that it thrummed in her mind as surely as her heartbeat. Ewan tugged at her sleeve, his small frame trembling under the weight of his fear. "Liora, we can't take him home. He'll kill us." She tightened her grip on her brother's hand. "He's wounded, fevered. He won't last the night if we leave him here." And though her voice was steady, inside she trembled. For every step through the darkened alleys, she felt the alpha's heat radiating against her. Fever burned his skin, sweat slicked across his chest. Yet beneath the sickness was power, coiled, dangerous, untamed. They dragged him with ropes slung beneath his arms, his legs stumbling, boots scraping cobblestone. At times he half shifted, his hands twisting into claws before snapping back, his teeth lengthening in the glow of torchlight before shrinking again. Ewan gasped every time, ready to run, but Liora forced herself to stay. He was not human, that much was clear. But something inside her, something she could not name, whispered that he was hers, and she his. By the time they reached the edge of the village, her muscles screamed with exhaustion. She led them into the cover of the forest, following the moonlit path to the crumbling stone cottage they called home. The air was damp, moss clinging to the walls, smoke stains blackening the hearth. It was poor shelter, but it was all they had. With a final heave, they dragged him onto her bed of straw and furs. His body dwarfed the pallet, his shoulders spilling over the edges. Ewan backed into a corner, clutching a wooden spoon like a weapon. His wide eyes never left the Alpha's chest, which rose and fell in ragged, shallow breaths. "Why did you do it, Liora? Why him? We could have taken food or wood for winter. Why him?" She wanted to say she didn't know, that she was a fool, cursed by impulse. But when she looked at Darius, his jaw clenched even in sleep, his lips whispering words she couldn't catch, her heart betrayed her. Because she had seen his eyes, and no amount of reason could undo what they had burned into her. She dipped a cloth in the basin, wiping the sweat from his brow. His skin was hot, his body convulsing with fever. Scars marred every inch of him, some jagged, some clean, each telling stories of battles survived. And then he spoke. Blood, fire, betrayal. His voice rasped like broken glass. His hand jerked, claws half-formed, before curling into a fist. Liora froze, cloth clutched in her fingers. He thrashed, muttering names, curses, fragments of war. Then suddenly his head snapped toward her, golden eyes flickering open for only a heartbeat. "Liora!" Her blood ran cold. She stumbled back, nearly dropping the cloth. Ewan gasped, clutching at her skirts. He said your name." Her pulse thundered in her ears. He couldn't know her. He shouldn't know her. And yet her name on his lips sounded less like recognition and more like a vow. The fever raged higher, pulling him back into delirium. His body shook, sweat drenching the sheets, muscles locking as if fighting invisible chains. Liora pressed the cloth against his chest, whispering, "Hush, rest, you're safe here." But even in his sleep he growled, low, primal, the sound vibrating through the floorboards. "Mine." The words slid from his lips, more beast than man, and her stomach knotted with heat and fear all at once. Ewan whimpered, "He's dangerous, Liora. Please, we should leave him in the woods." She shook her head, though her own body trembled. "No, we can't. He would die." And what? That she couldn't bear to see the fire in those golden eyes snuffed out? That some impossible thread tied her fate to his from the moment she laid eyes on him? She could not explain, not even to herself. So she stayed, wiping his sweat, cooling his fever, watching as his body shifted and twisted, wolf and man battling beneath his skin. And through it all, one truth sank deeper into her bones, with every growl, every whispered word. He knew her, and she his. And whether it was curse or destiny, she knew she would not escape him, not now, not ever.
The night pressed heavy around the cottage, the silence broken only by the crackle of a dying fire and the rasp of his breath. Liora sat at his side, her hands raw from wringing cloth after cloth in the basin, her back aching from leaning over his massive frame. Hours had passed, yet the fever did not break. The Alpha's body burned like a furnace, his skin glistened with sweat, every muscle drawn tight, veins pulsing with an energy she did not understand. Beneath her touch he was alive, terrifyingly alive, a storm caged in flesh. "Please," she whispered to no one, to the gods, to fate, to him. She wasn't sure. Ewan had long since curled in the corner, exhaustion dragging him into uneasy sleep. His small breaths were shallow, his little fists clenched even in dreams. She envied him, for she could not close her eyes, not with this man, this beast, thrashing at the edge of her bed. His lips moved again, a growl caught between man and wolf. Blood, war, mine. His name followed, broken, cracked, but unmistakable. Liora. Her stomach twisted. She had never told him, never spoken it near his ear, and yet he said it as if it belonged to him. The fire guttered low, shadows climbed the walls. She dipped the cloth again, pressed it to his chest. His heat seared her through the damp linen. Her breath hitched as she studied him, jaw clenched, lashes dark against flush skin, the cut of his throat exposed where his shirt had been torn. He was brutal, scarred, terrifying, and yet her hand lingered. Something inside her rebelled, screamed that this was madness, that the alphaking was not a man, but a weapon, forged of war and ruin, that one bite, one breath too close could unravel her. And yet... He stirred, his hand shot out, claws half-formed, gripping her wrist with shocking strength. She gasped, the basin nearly tipping over. His golden eyes flared open, fever-bright and feral, pinning her where she knelt. Mine. The word shook her to her bones. "Please, let me go," she whispered, though her voice trembled more with heat than fear. But he did not. His breath was ragged, lips parting, teeth lengthening into sharp white points. For one heartbeat he seemed caught between worlds, man and beast, sanity and madness. Then, with a shudder that rippled through his frame, he lunged. Pain seared her shoulder. Her cry split the silence as his teeth sank into her flesh. Not a killing blow, not a ripping tear, but a mark. Deep enough that her blood rushed hot, dripping down her arm. She shoved at him, but his weight was immovable, his body trembling as if he fought himself even as he bit. Heat exploded through her veins, racing to her heart, to her very soul. The world tilted. Her breath hitched into a moan, half agony, half something else. When he wrenched back, his eyes glowed molten gold. Blood stained his mouth, her blood. Liora stumbled, pressing her palm to the wound. "What have you done?" The words strangled in her throat. Fire burned beneath her skin, spreading from the bite like lightning through her veins. Her knees buckled, a flush of fever and want racking her body. She clutched the bedpost, gasping. "No," she whispered. This can't." But it was. The bond. The forbidden bond every village tale warned of. The bite that tied wolf and mate, sealing fate with blood. Her heart thundered wildly, too fast, as if it no longer beat for her but for him. Every breath she took filled her with his scent, smoke, iron, pine, and it was unbearable, intoxicating. "Stop it," she rasped, shaking her head. You don't own me." But even as she said it, her body betrayed her. Heat pooled low, desire tangled with fear. She wanted to recoil, to flee into the night, to drown herself in the river and wash his mark away. And yet, some primal part of her ached toward him, craved the fire he had unleashed. Tears pricked her eyes. "What have you done to me?" The fire hissed low, shadows deepening. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, the sound haunting, echoing, as if answering the bond she could not deny. Her hand trembled where it clutched her cloak, hiding the wound. The mark pulsed, searing, alive with every beat of her heart. She had saved him, but in his delirium he had damned her. And as she sank into the chair, too weak to stand, one truth pierced sharper than his teeth ever could. The bond had begun, and it would destroy them both.
Dawn broke slow and sullen, bleeding pale light through the cracks in the shutters. The forest outside stirred with the whispers of waking birds, the hush of wind threading through moss-covered branches. Yet inside the cottage, the world remained bound in silence, heavy with secrets that could never see daylight. Liora had not slept. Her eyes burned, her body ached, her wound pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Every throb was a reminder of his bite, of the forbidden mark etched into her flesh. She sat curled in the chair by the bed, cloak drawn tight, but no amount of fabric could shield her from the fire coursing beneath her skin. He had branded her, not with iron or chain, but with something older, something crueler. Fate. Her gaze flicked to him where he lay sprawled across the furs. His fever had broken sometime near dawn. The sweat on his chest had cooled, his breath evened into the slow, steady rhythm of deep sleep. Without the fever's madness clouding his face, he looked younger. Not young in years, no, the weight of time and battle carved deep into every scar, but younger in the way of men who had once been gods. His jaw was strong, his mouth cruel, his lashes long against his cheek. He was a vision of power even in weakness, and that truth unsettled her most of all, because even broken, he was beautiful. She shifted in the chair, restless. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard again the crunch of his teeth breaking her skin, felt again the rush of heat and want tangled with her scream. She could still taste the air, copper and pine, sharp as if her blood lingered on her tongue. Her body remembered, even as her mind rebelled. A low groan broke her thoughts. Her eyes snapped open. Darius stirred. His hand flexed against the furs, fingers twitching into claws before curling back into a fist. His body tensed as though waking from a nightmare, and then those golden eyes opened, clear this time, not fever-clouded. They locked on hers. Liora's breath caught, her body going rigid in the chair. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick and trembling. His gaze roved over her face, down her form, pausing on the place where her cloak covered her shoulder. His nostrils flared. He knew. Mate. The word was not a growl, not a fevered whisper. It was clear, certain, and it slammed into her like a blow. She lurched to her feet. No, don't say that. But he only rose, slow and deliberate, the motion rolling through his massive frame like a beast uncurling from slumber. The pallet groaned beneath him as he sat, his hair falling wild across his brow, his muscles shifting with lethal grace. It's you. His voice was rough, scraped raw from sickness, but beneath it was iron, recognition, claim. I am not yours, she spat, though the words trembled. His eyes burned brighter. You bear my mark. Her hand flew to her shoulder, clutching the wound through the cloak. Shame flared hot in her chest. You bit me when you were delirious. You didn't know what you were doing. He bared his teeth, not in madness this time, but in bitter amusement. I knew, even in fever. My wolf knew. We always know. Liora stumbled back a step, her spine pressing to the wall. The room felt too small, the air too thick with his scent, smoke, blood, male. It filled her lungs until she could barely breathe. I never asked for this, she whispered. And I never wanted it, he growled. voice dropping to a dark snarl. Her heart stuttered, the sharpness in his tone cut deep, unexpected. "I rejected this bond once," he said, his gaze raking over her as though the words themselves scalded. "Years ago, in war, the fates offered me a mate. I cast it aside. I had no time for weakness, no room for chains. I was alpha, king. I chose steel over softness, blood over bond." His eyes glittered, a storm brewing in their depths. "And now, the gods laugh. They chain me again, to you." Liora flinched, shame tangling with fury. "To me? You make it sound like a curse." He leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees, voice low and lethal. "It is." The words struck like knives. Her throat tightened, but her anger burned hotter than her tears. "Then why bite me at all? Why doom us both if you hate it so much?" His jaw clenched. For a moment silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of wind against the shutters. Finally he rasped, "Because I couldn't stop. Even after rejecting fate once, my wolf never forgot. The moment I smelled you, the fever burned hotter. The moment I touched you, the bond roared back to life. I fought it even in delirium. But when you touched me," his voice cracked, harsh with something like pain, "I lost." Her heart thudded so loud she thought he must hear it. She wanted to scream at him, to hate him, but the mark pulsed at her shoulder, and the heat in her belly betrayed her. "You damned me. And myself," he said bitterly. Ewan stirred in the corner, muttering, but did not wake. The silence between them thickened, charged. Finally, Liora forced herself to speak. "You said you were alpha, king. What war? What betrayal?" His jaw hardened. His gaze turned distant, haunted. For the first time his arrogance faltered, replaced by something colder. "I was Darius of the Highland clans, alphaking. I united the packs under one banner, forged them into an army. We were unstoppable, until men turned treacherous. Allies struck from behind. Wolves died screaming in fire. And those I trusted most," his voice caught, jagged as glass. "They sold me, shackled me, paraded me before their lords like a prize hound." Leora's breath trembled. The scars across his chest, the fury in his eyes, it all made sense now. "And now?" she asked softly. His gaze snapped back to hers, searing. "Now I have nothing. No throne, no army, only a bond I never wanted." Her stomach twisted, fury warred with desire, grief tangled with heat. She should have felt pity, but all she felt was the weight of his words pressing against the mark on her shoulder, against the thrum of something inside her she could not name. She lifted her chin, defiant, even as her heart quaked. "Then hate me if you must, but do not mistake me for weakness. I saved you, Darius, not the other way around." He curled, half snarl, half smile. "We'll see." The air between them crackled, tension sharp as lightning. For one heartbeat, she thought he might lunge again, might claim her fully, body and soul. But instead, he leaned back on the furs, eyes never leaving hers. "Sleep while you can, little flame," he said, voice dark with promise, "because the bond doesn't care what we want, and when it wakes fully, neither of us will escape." The fire hissed low. Her wound throbbed, her blood raced, and in the silence of the cottage, Liora realized a truth more terrifying than any fate. The awakening had begun. Night clung to the forest like a living thing. Shadows stretched long and restless across the path, curling around the roots and stones as if trying to trip her. The moon rode low, fat and pale, a watchful eye that seemed to follow her every step. Leora's breath puffed white in the air, quick and uneven. Her shoulder still throbbed with the mark he'd left, but worse than the pain was the light, the glow. It had started hours ago, faint as fireflies beneath her skin, growing stronger until she could no longer deny it. Her touch shimmered. The first time she thought she was mad. She had pressed her hand to Ewan's scraped knee after he stumbled near the fire, and the wound sealed itself before her eyes, skin knitting in a silver shimmer, blood vanishing as if it had never been. Her brother had stared, wide-eyed, but too sleepy to question. She had hushed him quickly, sending him back to bed. But she couldn't hush herself. Her hands shook now, tucked tight beneath her cloak as she hurried deeper into the woods. The alpha's voice still echoed in her head, that terrible growl of mate. She wanted to scrub it from her ears, but the bond burned hotter with every step, reminding her that no amount of denial could undo it. And now this power, this curse. She needed answers. The villagers whispered of them, the coven. Witches hidden deep in the forest, older than kings, older than wolves, dangerous, forbidden. But if anyone knew why her blood glowed and her touch healed, it would be them. The wind shifted, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and herbs crushed beneath unseen feet. Her heart kicked hard in her chest. She was close. A light appeared ahead, not torchlight. This burned green and blue, weaving through the trees like will-o-wisps. Leora's breath caught, fear battling wonder, but her legs carried her forward anyway. The clearing opened like a wound in the woods. At its center burned a circle of fire, flames that did not consume wood, but leapt from stones carved with runes. Around it hooded figures moved, their voices weaving together in a low chant that made the air hum. Witches. Liora froze at the edge of the clearing, unsure stepping closer meant salvation or death. But they had already seen her. One broke from the circle, her hood falling back to reveal hair white as bone and eyes black as midnight. She was neither young nor old. Her face was ageless, carved with wisdom and cruelty both. You bear his mark. The witch's voice sliced the silence, cool and certain. Leora's breath stuttered. She clutched her cloak tighter. The woman's gaze dropped to her shoulder as though the fabric were transparent. Her lips curved in something too sharp to be a smile. And yet it is not the wolf's fire alone that burns in you. She stepped closer, her hand lifting. A cold finger grazed her cheek, and the glow beneath her skin flared brighter in answer. Witch's blood. The circle's chant faltered. More hoods turned. More eyes gleamed, curiosity and hunger fixed upon her. Liora stumbled back a step. No, I'm not... Half-witch, half-wolf, the woman interrupted, her tone rich with amusement. The bridge between two worlds that should never meet. Her knees weakened. That's impossible. My mother, she was human. The witch's gaze sharpened. Was she? Memories flashed. Her mother's strange songs, her skill with herbs, the way she'd always seemed to know when storms would strike before clouds even gathered, the way the villagers whispered of her behind closed doors. Leora's stomach twisted. The woman circled her slowly, like a predator studying prey. Your power woke when he bit you. The bond has unlocked what your blood has always hidden. And now, child, you will burn twice as bright and twice as fast. The words chilled her to the bone. Another witch, younger, stepped forward, her voice urgent. She cannot stay. If the clans learn of her, both sides will hunt her. Wolves do not forgive witches, and witches do not forgive wolves. She will doom us all. The first witch silenced her with a glance. Then she returned her gaze to Liora, eyes gleaming. Do you feel it, the pull? Leora's lips parted, but no sound came. Because she did feel it. Every heartbeat echoed in her veins like a drum. Every breath carried Darius's scent, even though he was nowhere near. Her body ached with a longing she didn't want to name, didn't dare. The witch leaned close, her words a whisper of poison. To love him is to bind yourself to blood, war, and ruin. The bond will not be denied, but it will destroy you. Her chest tightened, her pulse roaring in her ears. She wanted to scream that she didn't love him, that she hated him for what he had done, for the mark that now burned her alive. But the truth coiled in her belly, traitorous and hot. She wanted him. Even in her fury, even in her fear, she wanted. And that terrified her most. The circle of witches resumed their chant, louder now, the runes in the stones glowing brighter. Power thrummed in the clearing, thick and suffocating, pressing against her skin. The first witch stepped back, raising her arms. "Choose, child. Deny the bond, and we will seal it, bind the wolf's mark so it can never claim you fully. Or accept it, and drown in a fate written long before your birth." Leora's heart thundered. Seal the bond? Break free? The thought of never again feeling the fire of his touch, of never hearing his voice call her mate, should have been a relief, but instead it hollowed her, left her breathless with something like grief. Images flashed, Darius's golden eyes locking on hers, the pain and power of his bite, the brokenness in his voice when he confessed his rejection of fate, the way her name had sounded on his lips. She hated him, and yet her hands trembled, the glow beneath her skin pulsing faster, brighter, as though her very blood awaited her decision. The witch's voice rose, sharp and commanding. "Choose." Leora's lips parted, words trembling on her tongue, and the night itself seemed to shatter. A howl ripped through the forest, deep and furious, echoing off the trees with such force that the witches faltered mid-chant. The fire guttered, the runes flickered. Darius. Leora's pulse spiked, the mark on her shoulder searing hot, answering the call of the beast that bore it. The witches hissed, their circle breaking, shadows rushing to extinguish the flames. The first witch's eyes blazed black as coal. "He comes for you, and when he finds you, child," she leaned close, her whisper colder than death, "the world will burn." The fire died, the clearing plunged into darkness, and in that silence Liora knew two things with terrifying clarity. Her blood was not only her own, and her fate was no longer hers to command.
The cottage had never felt smaller. Dawn painted pale stripes across the floorboards, yet the light did nothing to chase away the darkness inside. Darius filled the space like a storm cloud, broad shoulders brushing the low beams, golden eyes tracking every movement, every breath. He was no longer the fevered, half-broken alpha she had dragged from the auction yard. He was recovering. And with recovery came dominance. Liora felt it in the way he stood bare-chested, scars catching the morning glow. She felt it in the way his voice rumbled when he spoke, low and unyielding, a command even when he only said her name. And she felt it most in the way he watched her, like a hawk circling prey that was already caught, already his. "Where did you go last night?" His question cracked the silence, not soft, not curious, demanding. Liora stiffened, clutching the cloak tighter around her shoulders. The scent of smoke and wool thickened the air until it pressed against her lungs. She swallowed, keeping her voice level. "Out, for air." Golden eyes narrowed. He prowled closer, each step deliberate, a predator in no hurry. "You lie." Her heart stuttered. He couldn't know. The witches had cloaked their circle in shadows, hidden from mortal eyes. Yet the bond tugged at her shoulder like a chain, betraying her even when her lips stayed sealed. His hand shot out, seizing her wrist. Heat flared at the touch, the mark on her skin pulsing to life beneath her cloak. The bond doesn't lie, Liora. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I feel it. She tried to pull free, but his grip only tightened, not cruel, but unyielding. You don't own me. His mouth curved not into a smile, but into something darker. You bear my mark. The world already knows what you are. Anger blazed in her chest, but beneath it, beneath the fury, beneath the fear, desire coiled. His nearness was intoxicating. The wolf inside him bled into the air, primal and overwhelming. Every breath she drew was filled with him, and every beat of her heart betrayed her with its quickening pace. She tore her hand from his, stepping back until her spine met the wall. I'm never asked for this. I never wanted. He moved faster than thought, closing the distance. His palm slammed against the wall beside her, his body crowding hers. Heat radiated off him in waves, the hard lines of his chest brushing the folds of her cloak. His voice dropped, rough and dangerous. Neither did I. For a moment, silence stretched, thick, trembling, charged. Her breath tangled with his, her lips parted, her pulse thundering. Then his hand rose, slow, deliberate, tugging back the edge of her cloak to reveal the wound on her shoulder. The mark gleamed faintly in the dawn light, silver lines threaded with faint gold as though her very skin burned with both witch and wolf. His gaze locked on it, his nostrils flaring, his jaw tight. Mine. Her stomach clenched, the word rolled through her like fire. No, she whispered, though the denial trembled on her tongue. You don't get to claim me like some prize you won in battle. He leaned closer, so close his lips brushed the shell of her ear, sending shivers racing down her spine. Not a prize, a mate, and I will never let another man touch you. Her breath caught. His meaning sunk in like claws, possessive, territorial, absolute. She shoved at his chest, but her hands betrayed her, trembling as they pressed against the iron wall of muscle. I'm not yours to control. His laugh was low, bitter, edged with hunger. Tell that to your body. Heat surged between them, undeniable, treacherous. The bond thrummed, singing with every brush of his skin against hers. She hated it. She hated that her body arched toward him as her mind screamed defiance. She hated that she wanted him. Stop! The word came out breathless, not commanding. He did not stop. Instead, his lips found the curve of her throat slow and devastating. A growl rumbled against her skin, vibrating through her bones. Her knees weakened, her fingers clutching at his shoulders without thought. Her heart warred with her head, desire tangled with dread. She should push him away. She should run. Yet every brush of his mouth, every scrape of his teeth against the delicate skin of her neck sent fire racing lower, hotter. Darius! Her voice cracked, half warning, half plea. Her name on his lips snapped something in him. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her flush against him, his body hard and unyielding. The wall pressed cold at her back, but his heat devoured her front, drowning her in him. Fight me all you want, he growled, lips brushing hers now, their breaths mingling. But the bond wins. And then he kissed her. It was not gentle, it was not soft, it was acclaiming, hot, demanding, unrelenting. The world outside the cottage vanished, leaving only the clash of mouths, the scrape of teeth, the desperate pull of need. She shoved at him, then clutched harder, torn between rejection and surrender. His hand tangled in her hair, angling her head, deepening the kiss until she gasped. He devoured the sound, his tongue sweeping against hers, his growl vibrating through her chest. Her body betrayed her, arching, pressing closer, answering heat with heat. When he finally tore his mouth from hers, she was panting, her lips swollen, her heart a thunderstorm. "This is madness," she whispered. "This
"Is fate," he countered, eyes burning molten gold. The tension snapped like a bowstring, the cottage filled with the sounds of struggle and surrender, her gasps, his growls, the rustle of furs as the battle between will and want crashed over them. It was not gentle, it was not soft, it was raw, it was fire, it was the bond demanding what neither could deny. And just as the storm crested, the world outside intruded. A raven's cry split the morning, sharp and unnatural. Darius stiffened, his head snapping toward the window. The bond still burned between them, but something darker threaded the air now. Danger, watching, waiting. Liora blinked, dazed, clutching her cloak back around her trembling body. "What is it?" His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. Not what, who. The raven cried again, black wings flashing against the pale dawn as it vanished into the trees. Darius's growl was low, deadly. "She knows." Laura's pulse spiked. "Who?" His gaze burned into hers, the heat of their passion cooling into something colder, sharper. Lady Isildi. The name dripped like venom, filling the room with dread. "She knows I survived."
The night smelled of iron, sharp, metallic, suffocating. Liora woke to it, the tang of blood woven into the damp forest air, pressing through the cracks of the cottage walls. Her eyes flew open, her breath catching. For a heartbeat she thought it was a dream, some cruel echo of the witches' words, of their firelit prophecy. But the silence was wrong, too heavy, too watchful. Ewan stirred in his corner, clutching the thin blanket, his boyish face twisted with unease even in sleep. And beside her, on the pallet of furs, the alpha shifted. Darius. He wasn't sleeping. He hadn't been for hours. His golden eyes burned in the half-dark, catching every flicker of firelight, sharp as a predator waiting for prey to make the mistake of breathing too loudly. His bare chest rose and fell slow, controlled, but the tension in his body was unmistakable. Shoulders coiled tight, claws half-formed where his fingers curled into the pelts. "You smell it too," Liora whispered. His gaze cut to her. She should have flinched beneath it, but something inside her no longer knew how to. Not when the bond sang every time his eyes found her. Not when her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from that unbearable heat that tangled fury and hunger together until she couldn't tell them apart. "They're close," he said, his voice low, dangerous, a growl more than words. "Hunters." Her stomach dropped. "Lady Isildi," she breathed. The sound of the name was enough to twist his lips into a snarl. His jaw flexed, the veins in his neck standing out like cords. "She sends her vermin into my woods, to my door. She dares." But it wasn't just his woods anymore. Liora felt it, through the bond, through the mark burning faintly on her skin. Her territory was her prison, her sanctuary, her doom. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling, though she tried to steady it. Darius rose to his feet in one fluid motion. He was all muscle and shadow, filling the tiny room until the walls themselves seemed to shrink back in fear. "Out!" barked a voice beyond the door, cold, cruel. "By order of Lady Isildi, surrender the beast." Darius's snarl rattled the rafters. "Come take me." The door exploded inward. The first hunter didn't have time to scream. Darius was already shifting, bones snapping, claws elongating, fur ripping through flesh. His growl shook the cottage as his massive form filled the doorway, slamming into the man with enough force to shatter ribs. Blood sprayed the walls. Ewan cried out, covering his eyes. Liora grabbed him, pulling him back against the hearth. Her own body trembled, but not just from fear. Because with every slash of Darius's claws, every bite of his fangs, she felt it, the bond. Pain lanced through her shoulder when a spear cut into his side. She gasped, nearly collapsing, the mark searing like molten metal under her skin. "Liora!"
Ewan caught her as she swayed, his voice panicked. "What's happening?" She couldn't answer. She could only watch, breathless, as Darius ripped through the hunters, savage, unstoppable. But every wound they gave him became hers. A slash across his chest set fire to her ribs. A blade across his arm sent white-hot agony through her veins. Her cries mingled with the snarls of the alpha until she didn't know which belonged to which. Through the haze of pain, her eyes locked on him, blood dripping from his jaw, fur matted with gore, golden eyes burning like suns in the dark. And still he fought, because she was behind him, because she was his. Another spear, this one piercing his flank. She screamed, clutching her side, collapsing to her knees. The hunters faltered, confusion flashing across their faces. One hissed, "Per girl, she feels it too." Darius froze, and then he lost control. The wolf inside him surged free, a monster of shadow and fire, tearing through the men with a ferocity that made the walls shake. Bones cracked, flesh tore, the night filled with the sound of death. But every kill came at a cost. His body bled, and hers bled with it. By the time the last hunter fell, throat torn out, Liora was gasping on the floor, blood at her lips, though no blade had touched her. He turned to her, his wolf eyes glowing, his chest heaving. Liora. Her vision blurred, her body trembling from agony and something far worse, need. The bond pulsed, dragging her closer, whispering that his wounds were hers, his strength hers, his fate hers. There was no longer a line between them. She crawled toward him, her hand trembling as it reached for his bloodied fur. "You'll die," she whispered, half sob, half plea. He caught her hand in his massive claws, then shifted back, bones cracking, fur receding, until he knelt before her as a man once more, broken, bleeding, but alive. His forehead pressed to hers, his breath hot and ragged. "If I die, so do you." The truth of it rang through the bond like thunder. She felt it in her marrow, in her soul. And in that moment, Liora knew there was no running, no breaking free, no pretending she could ever escape what had already claimed her. Her destiny wasn't hers anymore. It was his. The mate bond burned brighter than the moon, than the stars, than her fear. And outside, in the blood-soaked forest, the raven cried again, flying back to her mistress. Lady Isideld would know. The hunt had only begun.
The climb into the Highlands felt endless, a winding path carved through mist and shadow. The air grew thinner the higher they rode, carrying the sharp bite of heather and the cold breath of the mountain winds. Liora's cloak whipped behind her as the stallion carried her up the steep trails, pressed close against Darius's powerful frame. Every muscle in his back was tight, every line of him alert, as though he expected the rocks themselves to rise and strike them down. Ian rode behind them on a smaller horse, his face pale and drawn. The boy had spoken little since the battle. His wide eyes still carried the imprint of blood and claws and screams. He looked at Darius as one might look at a storm, half awe, half terror. But it was Liora who felt the storm raging deepest, not outside, inside. The bond had been unbearable since that night. Every hoofbeat thrummed through her blood in time with Darius's pulse. She could feel his wounds under her skin, though they were already knitting with unnatural speed. She could feel the hunger in him, the hunger for her, gnawing through the tether that bound them. She told herself it was only the ride, only the closeness, only the exhaustion. But when his hand shifted briefly from the reins to her thigh, steadying her as the horse stumbled on a rocky incline, heat rushed through her body so violently she thought she'd burn alive. The bond wasn't sleeping. It was awake, ravenous, and waiting. By the time the peaks opened around them into a vast hollow carved by glaciers and time, Leora's head was spinning. The Highland Valley stretched before her, a cathedral of stone crowned with snow and fog. Smoke rose in the distance from a cluster of wooden longhouses at the valley's heart. Wolves moved among them, huge, hulking shapes that made her breath catch. The pack. Darius slowed his horse, his gaze sweeping over the valley with something between pride and wariness. "Home," he said, his voice low, thick with something unreadable. But as they rode closer, the air shifted. One by one, heads turned. Wolves lifted their snouts, catching the scent of strangers. Shadows detached from the tree line, men and women emerging, some in fur, some half-shifted, all bristling with suspicion. Yellow eyes, silver scars, warriors hardened by the wild. The stallion snorted nervously as the wolves circled. Ian shrank in his saddle, and Leora felt the weight of their stares like knives. She didn't need to hear their growls to understand what they were thinking. Outsider, witch, intruder. A man stepped forward, taller than the rest, his dark hair braided down his back, his chest bared despite the cold. A great scar split his face from temple to jaw. His eyes fixed on Darius, then flicked to Leora with open contempt. "You bring strangers into our hollow, and not just strangers. I smell witchcraft on her." Murmurs rippled through the pack. Some snarled, others spat. One woman in wolf form snapped her jaws, the sound sharp as a breaking bone. Leora's stomach twisted. She gripped the edge of the saddle until her knuckles whitened. The mark on her skin pulsed, hot and furious. She could feel Darius's rage rising in answer. He dismounted in a single fluid motion, towering over the scarred man. His golden eyes burned like fire against snow. "She is mine." The words cracked through the air like thunder. A hush fell. Even the wolves stilled, hackles raised but frozen. Darius turned, reaching for Leora, his hands rough, demanding as he lifted her down from the horse. The moment her boots hit the ground, he pulled her against him, his arm iron around her waist. "She is my mate," his voice carried to the farthest stone, to the farthest ear. "By blood, by bond, by the bite that marked her. Any who defy her, defy me." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "You claim a witch. I claim what is mine." His lips crushed against Leora before she could breathe, before she could think. It wasn't a kiss, it was a brand, fierce, possessive, a stake driven into the earth before his pack. His teeth grazed her lower lip, drawing a gasp that echoed through the stillness. When he pulled back, the bond screamed between them, alive, thrumming, undeniable. Heat coiled in Leora's belly, twisting between fury and desire until she didn't know which would win. She should have shoved him away. She should have screamed, but her body betrayed her, leaning into him, shivering under his grip. The pack watched, silent, judging, some with disgust, some with hunger. "She doesn't belong," one voice snarled from the crowd. "She'll curse us," hissed another. "Better dead than at our fire." The wolves' mutters grew, rising into a storm. Leora's chest tightened. Her palms itched with sparks of power she didn't mean to call. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing down. Then, pain lanced her side, white-hot, sharp. she gasped, clutching her ribs. Her knees buckled. "Liora!" Darius's voice cut through the chaos, his grip tightening around her. But it wasn't a blade. Not this time. It was her. Her bones burned, her skin crawled, stretching too tight over her muscles. Her vision blurred as light seared behind her eyes. The pack snarls faltered. They knew. They saw. "She's shifting," someone whispered. "No," Liora gasped, trembling, terror flooding her veins. "It's too soon. I can't." Her scream tore through the hollow as her body convulsed. Her spine arched, bones cracking, reshaping. Claws split her fingertips, blood dripping from her palms. Her jaw ached, stretching, teeth lengthening. Fur prickled across her arms in dark, silken waves. She collapsed to her knees, hands clawing at the frozen earth as the change consumed her. Darius knelt beside her, his voice low, commanding. "Breathe, Liora. Let it take you. Don't fight it." But she did fight. God, she fought. The magic twisted her insides, tearing her apart and stitching her back together in shapes that weren't human. Her witch blood screamed against it, clashing with the wolf rising inside her. The bond pulled taut, threatening to snap. Through the haze, she saw the scarred man sneer. "She's breaking. Witches can't shift." "Watch her," Darius snarled. "Watch your new queen rise." His hand cupped her face, rough thumb brushing the tear-streaked line of her cheek. His other hand pressed to her back, steadying her as if his strength could anchor her soul. And then the wolf broke free. Liora screamed, cut off into a guttural snarl. Her body convulsed one final time, then stilled. She panted, the world sharper, scents flooding her nose, colors bleeding into wild new hues. She lowered her head and saw paws where her hands had been. Black fur, slick with sweat and blood, gleamed under the pale moon. Gasps filled the hollow. She had shifted. A witch had shifted. The pack reeled, their disbelief thick in the air. Some bowed their heads instinctively, others backed away, eyes wide with fear. Darius's smile was a predator's triumph. His golden gaze glowed brighter than the moon as he rose, standing beside her. "Look well," he said, his voice carrying. "My mate, my wolf, my queen." Liora's chest heaved, her body trembling from the agony of the shift, but something deeper stirred beneath it. Strength, power, a wildness that felt both alien and familiar, coursing through her veins like fire. She lifted her head, meeting the pack's eyes. Their scent filled her nose. Fear, suspicion, rage. She growled, the sound low, dangerous, echoing from her chest. The valley shivered. For the first time they saw her not as a witch, not as an outsider, but as a wolf. And under the blood moon's fading light, as the pack shifted uneasily around her,
Liora understood a truth that made her heart pound and her soul quake. The battle for their trust had only begun. And if she failed, it wouldn't be Lady Isolde who destroyed her. It would be the pack.
The Highlands did not sleep. Mist wound through the hollow like a restless spirit, curling around the longhouses and spilling into the dens where the wolves slumbered. Somewhere high above, the moon dragged its pale light across the jagged teeth of the peaks, silvering the watchtowers and setting the streams aglow like veins of molten steel. But in the heart of the valley, Liora could not close her eyes. Her body still ached from the shift,
every joint sore, her muscles trembling with the memory of claws bursting through her skin, of bones cracking, of blood spilling. She had shifted once and survived, but her witch blood seethed against it, reminding her that she walked a razor's edge between two worlds. If she fell too far to either side, she would break. Darius slept beside her on the furs, one arm draped across her waist, his heat overwhelming, his scent wrapping her in something primal and possessive. He slept like a predator even in stillness, jaw tight, chest rising and falling with the rhythm of restrained violence. She stared at him in the moonlight, tracing the shadows of his scars. The bond whispered through her blood, pulling her closer even as her heart screamed against the chains of it. She hated him for binding her, for claiming her, for taking her choice. And yet, God's help her, she wanted him too. The memory of his kiss before the pack still burned on her lips, shame and hunger tangled in a knot that left her restless. Her gaze drifted to the boy curled by the hearth, Uan, her little brother. His breathing was soft, steady, but she could see the fear written in the tightness of his face even in sleep. He was too young for war, too young for witches and wolves and blood moons. She wanted to gather him in her arms, to promise him safety, to shield him from the nightmare their lives had become. But she couldn't, because Lady Isolde had not forgotten them. The raven's cry tore the silence apart. Liora sat upright, her skin prickling. Darius's arm tightened around her instantly, golden eyes snapping open, glowing in the dark. "What is it?" he growled, already half-shifted, claws glinting. Before she could answer, the door slammed open. A gust of icy air blasted through the den, carrying with it the stench of rot and smoke. And standing in the threshold, black cloak billowing, eyes like shards of obsidian, Lady Isolde. Her beauty was cruel, carved in marble, untouched by time. The air thickened with her presence, shadows crawling across the walls like living things. In her hand she held a dagger that pulsed with black flame. And in her grasp, dragged forward like a shield, was Uan. Leora's heart stopped. The boy whimpered, his wrists bound, the dagger's edge pressed against his throat. "No!" Leora's voice broke, her body trembling. "Please!" Isolde's smile was venom. "You thought you could hide him from me, little witch? Did you think your alpha could shield you from the depths of blood? No, he is mine. He always was." Darius rose in a blur, his body towering, muscles coiled like a beast ready to strike. His growl rattled the walls. "Release the boy, or I will tear you apart." Isolde tilted her head, her black hair falling like ink. So quick to threaten, so slow to understand. Her eyes slid to Liora, sharp as blades. "You feel it, don't you? The bond, the pain. Every wound he takes is yours. Every scar he bears you bleed. You thought that was love? No, little witch, that is a chain. And tonight I will break it." Her dagger pressed closer to Uan's throat. The boy cried out, his tears streaking his face. Liora surged forward, but Darius caught her arm, holding her back with brutal strength. "Don't," he growled. "It's what she wants." Tears blurred Leora's vision. Her brother's scent, fear, salt, childhood innocence cut through her chest like a blade. She couldn't stand still. She couldn't let him die. "Let him go!" she screamed, her hands sparking with light, witchfire dancing in her palms. Isolde laughed, cold and cruel. "Ah, there it is. The witch tries to play wolf. But you cannot be both, and when you finally choose, it will kill you."
The air thickened. Black fire leapt from her dagger, spreading across the walls, consuming wood and stone alike. The flames didn't burn. They devoured, leaving only emptiness in their wake. Wolves outside howled in terror as the shadows spread, swallowing the hollow and creeping darkness. Darius shoved Liora behind him, his body shifting in a rush of fur and bone. The alpha wolf exploded forward, his golden eyes blazing, his claws rending through the dark. He struck at Isolde, but the shadows swallowed his blows, tendrils of black magic lashing around his limbs, binding him. He roared, straining against them, but every pull sent agony into Liora's chest. She cried out, falling to her knees, as the bond transmitted his pain into her body. Her skin burned, her ribs cracked, her vision swam. "Do you see?" Isolde hissed, her eyes gleaming. "Your mate weakens you. His wounds are yours. His death will be yours. And all it takes is the boy's life to end you both." The dagger's flame licked closer to Uwan's throat. Something inside Liora snapped. She screamed, the sound tearing from her chest like a storm. The witchfire in her palms flared, brighter than the moon, brighter than the black flame. Power surged through her veins, wild and uncontrollable, answering not just her will, but something older, deeper, the bond itself. The fire leapt from her hands, not at Isolde, but at Darius. It wrapped around him like chains of light, fusing with his wolf form, merging flesh and flame, power and claw. His roar shook the mountains as the witchfire and the wolf became one, their souls woven together in a blaze of white-gold fury. Liora staggered, the bond burning her alive, but she did not let go. She poured herself into him, her anger, her fear, her love, her despair. His claws became brighter, his teeth sharper, his body wreathed in fire that did not consume but destroyed every shadow it touched. Isolde's smile faltered. Darius struck. The firewolf lunged, his claws tearing through the black magic, ripping it apart strand by strand. The shadows screamed as they died, collapsing into ash. Isolde reeled, her dagger shattering under the force of the blow. For the first time, fear flickered across her perfect face. But victory came with cost. The bond stretched too thin. Liora's vision went white, her body convulsing. Blood poured from her nose, her mouth, her skin. The witchfire inside her rebelled, screaming against the wolf, against the bond, against the impossible union she had forced. She collapsed, her scream drowned in the roar of battle. Through the haze, she saw Darius's golden eyes burning through the flames, saw the wolf tear through Isolde, saw black feathers scatter into the wind. She heard her brother's sobs as he tumbled free unbound, alive. And then, silence. The valley was still. The shadows were gone. The fire dimmed. Darius stood over the ruins of battle, chest heaving, his body battered but unbroken. His eyes found hers across the wreckage, raw with something unspoken. Fear, fury, desperation. Liora tried to rise, but her body betrayed her. Her strength drained into the earth, her heart pounding slower, weaker. She tasted blood, too much blood. She had given him everything, too much. And as the darkness closed around her, the last thing she felt was his arms catching her, pulling her against his chest, his voice rough and broken against her ear. "Don't leave me." But the bond was fading, and the fire that had saved them all was about to consume her.
The Highlands lay hushed, blanketed in a silence that felt unnatural. Even the wolves outside their dens had stilled, ears pricked to the sky, as though the entire valley held its breath. Above, The moon bled into fullness, burning red against the night. The blood moon, the omen of endings and beginnings. Darius knelt in the furs, cradling Liora in his arms. Her skin was cold, her breath faint, her lips pale as snow. The fire that had saved them, the fire that had destroyed Isolde, now flickered dangerously low inside her, threatening to snuff out entirely. His chest heaved with a rage and fear he had never known. This was not the alpha's fury, not the beast's hunger. This was a man begging the universe not to take the one thing he could not lose. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice breaking, his golden eyes fierce but wet with desperation. "You cannot leave me now, not after everything. Do you hear me, little witch? You are mine. Mine." But she did not stir. Her head lolled weakly against his chest. The bond between them was threadbare, fraying, unraveling with every passing breath. He felt the pull of her life ebbing, felt her slipping through his grasp like water through his claws. The wolves of the Highland pack gathered at the edges of the den. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others watched warily, fear lacing their eyes. They had seen her fire, her power, witch and wolf fused into one. They had seen her nearly burn alive to save them. Now they whispered of omens, of curses, of whether this blood-soaked girl could truly be their queen. But Darius cared nothing for their whispers. His world had shrunk to her heartbeat, so faint, so fragile. The blood moon swelled higher, casting its crimson glow through the den. It painted her pale skin in shades of rose, kissed her lips with phantom warmth. And then the bond between them pulsed. Weak, yes, but not gone. Darius closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to hers. "If you take me, take her too. If you leave her, then leave me broken, but I will not let her fall alone." His wolf stirred inside him, restless, wild, and deeper still, something older than wolf, older than witch awakened. The blood moon did not just mark the sky, it sang, a low hum, a call that resonated through blood and bone. Liora stirred faintly, her lashes fluttering. Her lips moved without sound. Darius leaned closer, desperate to hear. A single word escaped, fragile as smoke. "Bond." And he knew. This night was not meant to end her. This night was meant to bind them. He shifted, biting into his wrist until blood welled hot and rich. Crimson droplets fell onto her lips. The blood moon caught them, glowing, igniting them with a strange silver flame. "Drink," he commanded softly, almost pleading. "Take me into you, not as your alpha, not as your captor, but as your equal, your mate, your king." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then her lips parted, instinct pulling her, need guiding her. She drank, just a drop. Then another. Her body convulsed, racked with pain and power, her back arched, her eyes flew open, lit with twin flames of violet and gold. Witch and wolf fused into one. The fire that had nearly consumed her now settled into her veins like molten sunlight. Her wounds sealed, her breath steadied, her skin glowed under the blood moon's kiss. And the bond, oh the bond, no longer threadbare, no longer fragile. It roared to life,
a tether of fire and blood that linked their souls unbreakably. Not chains, not captivity. Choice. Unity. Darius gasped as it surged through him, filling every hollow he had carried, every scar he had borne. She was not just in his arms anymore. She was inside him, and he inside her. Liora blinked, her gaze locking onto his. For the first time, she did not look at him with hatred or fear. Her eyes, glowing in the moonlight, softened. "You knelt before me," she whispered, her voice trembling but strong. "Not as master, not as captor, as my equal." And then, before the pack, before the moon, before the world itself, Darius lowered himself onto his knees fully, bowing his head to her. "I am yours," he said, the alpha's voice breaking into something utterly human. "Not because I mocked you, because you claimed me. Witch, wolf, queen." The pack gasped. Wolves fell to their knees, some in reverence, others in awe. The sight of their brutal alpha leaning before the woman they had feared sealed the truth. She was not curse, she was destiny. Liora rose, strength flowing into her bones like lightning. Her body hummed with power, her veins alive with dual fire. She reached down, taking his face into her hands, and then she kissed him. It was not the stolen, brutal kiss of before. It was not shame, not fear. It was a kiss that shattered walls, that burned away doubt, that sealed their bond in choice and desire. The blood moon blazed brighter, flooding the Highlands in crimson light. The bond between them flared, glowing like a brand across their souls. Witch and wolf, bound forever. Ian ran to her side, his small arms flinging around her waist, tears of relief streaming down his cheeks. She pulled him close, holding him with one arm as she remained locked with Darius's. Her family, her blood, her mate. And the pack howled, their voices rising into the night, a chorus of acceptance, of surrender, of reverence. The sound rolled through the mountains, echoing like thunder. And in that moment, under the blood moon, Liora knew her destiny was not to be torn apart by wolf and witch blood. Her destiny was to unite them. Darius rose beside her, their hands still intertwined. His golden eyes burned as he looked at her, not as alpha, not as warrior, but as man. "Forever," he murmured. "Forever," she echoed. They stood as king and queen, bound not by chains, but by love, magic, and blood. And for the first time the Highlands did not tremble in fear of what was to come. They trembled in awe of it. The blood moon dipped lower, its light fading into dawn, but its mark remained, etched into their bond, eternal. And so the story did not end with despair. It ended with triumph, with unity, with a love fierce enough to tame fire and wolf alike. Liora had been hunted, cursed, broken, but tonight she rose unshattered, not just a witch, not just a wolf, something greater. A queen born of fire and blood, a mate chosen by fate and by her own heart, and by her side, Darius, no longer her captor, no longer her enemy, but her equal, her king. Bound by the blood moon. And to my listeners, if this chapter gripped your heart, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of this story stood out to you the most. It means the world to know which moments struck deepest. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful stories, and hit subscribe so you never miss the next twist in this saga.